As NASCAR's 2023 season comes to an end this weekend at Phoenix, there are a ton of lasts happening, so let's talk about them. When the checker flag falls on Sunday, there will be a number of things that we'll see for the last time in the sport, and we'll start with the big ones in the Cup Series. On Sunday, when the checker flag falls, that will be Kevin Harvick's final race as a full-time NASCAR Cup Series driver, likely as a NASCAR driver in general. It'll be his last race at Stewart-Haas Racing. 60 wins, 1 championship, and one heck of a legendary career finally comes to a close. When Kevin Harvick leaves the sport at the end of Sunday, he is the last guy that will have raced full-time in the NASCAR Winston Cup Series to be the last one to retire from what is now just the NASCAR Cup Series. In 2024, there will be nobody on the grid that raced full-time in the Winston Cup Series as a full-time NASCAR Cup Series driver in 2024. Of course, Ryan Newman, if he makes select starts, will of course have raced in that era, but it's not full-time. So when Kevin Harvick leaves, so does basically kind of the end of an era. It's the end of a chapter, closing. He came in to replace Dale Earnhardt on short notice, everybody knows that, and then he went on to have a legendary career, a career that should have had more than one championship, and maybe his loyalty to RCR and sticking there was a detriment to his career. And then you can kind of say the same thing about Stewart-Haas Racing here at the end when it started to dip, but his 2020 season was magical, and for a guy that was definitely up there in age, it was something that maybe you didn't expect. And then he comes out and racks off 2 wins in 2022, and you're like, maybe Harvick's back. And 2023 seen its struggles, but he's had speed at times. That team just hasn't been able to close out the deal and get that victory. But when the checker flag falls on Sunday and Kevin Harvick likely goes winless in his final season, he still has a massively legendary career to look back on. He just won't be a full-time Cup driver anymore. He will be joining the Fox booth next year, though, so Harvick's not going anywhere. Maybe he has a voice in narration, too, after that Ford Mustang video, the unveiling of their new Cup car for 2024. Speaking of Stewart-Haas Racing and Kevin Harvick, another driver, Aric Almirola, will also be retiring from full-time NASCAR Cup Series competition at the end of the race on Sunday, and his last race for Stewart-Haas Racing as well. 3 career Cup Series wins for Aric Almirola. We'll see him likely run a partial schedule in either the Xfinity Series or the Truck Series next year. That still seems to be up in the air, and with Almirola leaving, also, Smithfield is leaving as well, and Almirola said that he tried to talk Smithfield into staying around at Stewart-Haas Racing, and they weren't going to do that. Their sponsorship has always been tied to Aric, to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars at this point. There is a solid chance that over the last decade that Smithfield has been the sponsor of Aric Almirola. They have invested $125 to $150 million in the sport of NASCAR. They have 3 wins to show for it, that's an expensive ROI there for you. Well, in terms of how much money they spent to how many wins they have. Obviously, from a consumer standpoint, as a B2C, it's probably paid dividends really well. I mean, I do specifically buy Smithfield bacon when I see it at the store. So, Aric Almirola's career with Stewart-Haas Racing and in the Cup Series, more than likely as a full-time driver, comes to an end on Sunday. Also coming to an end is Ty Dillon's tenure at Spire. 1 year and done. He did 1 year at GMS, done. 1 year at Spire, done. He's likely headed to Kaulig Racing next year in the number 16 car to replace AJ Allmendinger. And I'll just go ahead and get ahead of the news right now and say that when we roll into Phoenix next year in 2024, it will be Ty Dillon's last race for Kaulig Racing. He'll just continue to go down this path of one and done, one and done, one and done, but he does bring some sponsorship with him. Sunday will also be Justin Haley's last race with Kaulig Racing. Their longest tenure driver is leaving the team at the end of the year and heading to Rick Ware Racing in 2024 in hopes of turning that program around. We'll see if he's able to do that. It also will be the last race for Legacy Motor Club as a Chevy team, as they will switch over to the Toyota camp next year and be a fully backed TRD factory program along the same lines as 2311 Racing and Joe Gibbs Racing. Obviously, John Hunter Nemechek's joining them next year alongside Eric Jones, so we'll see if it can turn around their fortunes next year. It will also be the last race for Live Fast Motorsports as a chartered NASCAR Cup Series team. They, of course, sold their charter over to Spire, who will now run it as whatever the number is for Zane Smith on lease from Trackhouse. You're going to need some yarn and connectors to keep track of everything next year. But Live Fast has said that they are potentially looking at running a partial schedule in 2024, and we'll see if that happens, but they will not have a charter. On the Xfinity Series side, we're seeing a number of other lasts that will be happening on Saturday after that checker flag falls. Saturday will be Sammy Smith's last race for Joe Gibbs Racing. He'll be leaving that number 18 car at the end of the year and taking his sponsor and pilot Flying J with him over to JRM to hop into the number 8 car next year, replacing Josh Berry. Speaking of Josh Berry, Saturday will be his last race for Junior Motorsports, as a guy that has brought JRM 100+ victories in his career, 5 Xfinity wins, a national touring title for late model stocks. Not only will it be his last race with JRM, his last race with Chevy for now. We'll see what happens into the future, but it will be his last with them in the Xfinity Series as he moves up to the Cup Series in 2024 with Stewart-Haas Racing, replacing Kevin Harvick. It will also be the last race for Sheldon Creed at Richard Childress Racing, which I'm sure he's more than happy about at this point. He will be departing RCR at the end of the season, and he cannot wait for that checker flag at Phoenix to come out on Saturday, as he will be headed to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2024, as per Austin Hill, which we already knew about, but Austin Hill made it official. It will also be the last race for Chandler Smith in the number 16 College Chevrolet. He will be headed to Joe Gibbs Racing next year, replacing the departing John Hunter Nemechek or Sammy Smith. I'm still not sure on the car numbers there. Speaking of John Hunter Nemechek, it will be his last race in the Xfinity Series as a full-time driver. He could also, of course, do some part-time races next year, but he will be departing JGR at the end of the year to move up to Legacy Motor Club in that number 42 car, replacing Noah Gragson / Carson Hocevar. And then for the Truck Series on Friday night, when that checker flag falls, 2 of the most prestigious teams in the Truck Series over the last decade plus will close their doors. Kyle Busch Motorsports will no longer be known as Kyle Busch Motorsports. It has now been acquired by Spire, who will continue to run the truck program and run, I believe, a 3-truck program in 2024, but it will not be called KBM anymore, which is a huge bummer. 100+ victories for that organization, multiple championships, a number of just incredible moments, good and bad, have come out of that shop, and they've touched or had a part in a ton of NASCAR Cup Series drivers' careers, and everybody has gone through that TRD pipeline. So it's a bummer to see them go, but it's nice that their legacy will be carried on by Spire in a sense. At the same time, GMS, another legendary Truck Series team over the last decade, will also close their doors at the end of the season, with their assets likely being sold off, but nobody's acquiring them per se. Their drivers have all found seats. Grandin Finger and Raja Cruz haven't officially announced anything yet, but they will land somewhere in 2024. Daniel Dye is off to Bill McAnally Racing in 24 to be a teammate alongside Christian Eckes. Also, as a last in the Truck Series, when the checkered flag falls on Friday night, it will be Hailie Deegan's last race in the Truck Series for ThorSport and probably ever, as she moves up to the Xfinity Series next year with AM Racing in that number 15 Ford Mustang. So yeah, there's a lot of last happening. It's kind of a bummer, right? You never want to see these chapters close, and when you see a guy like Kevin Harvick, if you've been a lifelong NASCAR fan or a NASCAR fan for at least an extended period of time, or if you've been watching since 2001 like some of us, it's a bummer to see him go. It's like he's really the last one of those big stars that came up through the early to mid-2000s that's still hanging around. Kyle Busch, of course, is still here, which is great to see, but eventually his time's going to come too. But Harvick feels like that last, main character of that chapter that's closing, and it's a bummer. And then, of course, with the Truck Series closures happening as well, the Truck Series will be fine, of course. We've seen bigger teams close than these two. So, yeah, if I missed one, let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe to the channel. Follow me on TikTok at BreakHard, Instagram and Twitter at BreakHardBlog.